Hi, I'm Eleanor, and welcome to this week's episode of the Intuition Lab. This week, I'm going to be talking about using your intuition to help you deal with family members, coworkers, and people you just can't cut off in your life that you have to deal with on a regular basis, and it's giving you a lot of grief and angst. Let's face it, there's a lot of good and there's a lot of mediocre and a lot of terrible advice out there about how to handle these situations. But even looking at the truly good advice, is it appropriate for you? Like anything in life, if you are trying to do something with the wrong tools, even though those tools are perfectly grand, like a hammer or a screwdriver, but you really need a wrench or a pair of pliers, it's just not going to work out very well. So I think there are two prongs of attack and about how to deploy your intuition in a situation like this. And the first thing you really want to look at is how to best handle the person or situation. Really take it on a case by case basis. And the first thing you're really going to use is your sense of discernment. What is actually going on? One example that people love to pull out these days is to call everyone a narcissist. And I think that there aren't as many narcissists out there that as people would like to think. I would say maybe 10 to 15% of the population, true narcissists, but there are many, many, many more people out there who are very immature and act like a narcissist. This isn't the best example, but think about the way young children, especially under the age of 7, act. They can act in selfish, self serving ways, bless their little hearts, right? But they're immature and they don't realize what they're doing. And I think we have an epidemic of chronically immature people out there wreaking havoc. But that's just one example of how someone can be toxic and still be someone you can't cut off. So, the best thing to do, as ever, you know what I'm going to say, is to tune into your intuition. So, let's all take a deep breath, calm yourself, get to your energetic 5 state, still your mind, ground, shield, shed, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, or this is your first episode, just take a deep breath, get yourself to a balanced, like think a 5 out of 10 in terms of agitation, excitement, general demeanor, and calm your mind as much as you can. And then the real intuitive inquiry here is to ask yourself these two key questions: what's really going on and why? And wait for the answers, because sometimes we have an idea of what we think is going on, but that's not really the case. And the beauty of using your intuition here is that you can use it to hone in very quickly and directly on what's actually going on and some of the why of the matter as well. And that will help you determine, is someone not feeling well and that's why they're acting out? I mean, I wouldn't say that, having a lot of pain is a reason to lash out at people, but if you're really hurting, that's just what's going to happen in many cases, right? So is that the case? Is a person acting out of character? Do you feel there's something deeper going on? Or do you honestly feel that it is targeted towards you? So you've asked yourself that. And also, now's the time to also tune into your intuition once you've got some responses to that first question and ask, what can be done? What can you do in this situation? Not what you think should be done, what other people should do. Because remember, we can only ever control our actions, our perceptions in the long run. What can be done? The beauty of intuition here is that it can help you to rise above your feelings, your strong feelings, many of which I'm sure are justified, and separate them from the fact of the matter. Like, you might want your boyfriend to do X, but he was doing Y when you met him. Maybe he stopped temporarily because you made a big deal out of it, but he's just going to be who he is. It's just an example I pulled out of thin air. But the beauty of intuition is that The lay of the land is easier to see from that detached, higher level intuitive viewpoint, the one that's pulled you back out of the drama and the mess. So you can more readily assess what's going on and how to handle that. If you really have to live with this person and you don't feel you can cut them off, you need to really know the what and why it's going on. Maybe the person is a malignant narcissist. Maybe they have, undiagnosed, untreated mental issues. Maybe they're dealing with an addiction, you know, any other number of reasons. Maybe they're afraid for their own position and are acting out. Your intuition can help you determine what's going on instead of you maybe going off on a tangent that isn't really related. So it can help you be almost coldly objective in all of this. The second method of attack, if you will, is one that I think is almost more important, or certainly as important and maybe not as recognized. And that is how to not lose yourself and even thrive if you just can't cut someone off or leave, right? That is the internet's favorite response to anything. Just leave, just leave. That's not always the case for safety reasons, financial reasons. Maybe you, on some level, aren't emotionally or psychologically ready to let go. If you have to deal with a difficult situation and you can't leave, it's important to not lose yourself and thrive if you can. Many strategies, such as gray rocking, can work, but it also leads you to suppress your parts of yourself or feel like you have to kill those tender, sensitive, beautiful parts of yourself off just to survive in this situation. But I invite you, through using your intuition, to find ways to guard that part of yourself. And I'm not telling you to share intimate parts of yourself with people who are just going to use it as ammunition against you. I have a lot of experience with that. But to mask and gray rock, excuse me, when you have to, but also know it's a front. And behind all of that, there's this still beautiful garden that is you. All of those tender, sensitive, wonderful things like your capacity to love, your generosity, your desire to be of service, just to name a few, are still thriving in the midst of what would wear anyone down. So here, your intuitive inquiry questions are: what is the best for you here now? What is the best thing for you to be doing? How can you best handle this? And be prepared to hear some tough answers from your intuition. It's coming from a place of divine guidance and just supreme love for you. What is the best for you here? And how can you even grow in this situation? Because we think, well, you're just there to suffer, but that's not true. You can grow and thrive and find joy, even if it isn't safe to express it. I grew up in a situation where it was often not safe to express happiness because that would trigger an outburst, a violent outburst. And I know it's terrible, but, I've moved past it. The way to think of yourself in this situation using your intuitive advice is: think of like the weed growing out of the side of an abandoned building, right? Or a ruin of some sort, or flowers that grow over the side of a cliff. Like, I like to walk along the beach, and sometimes, you're in areas where there's a bit of a rise or a cliff overlooking a beach, and you look over the edge and you see plants growing out at impossible angles, in places where you don't think that anything living can survive or thrive. And you look over and there are these beautiful little clusters of flowers. And that's pretty much what you want to do for yourself. You want to thrive in the midst of a difficult situation. The next thing to consider is when to act. What is your timeline? Do you never leave? Do you stay? Do you wait for certain conditions to be met, not by others, but for certain things to happen? Like, case in point, if you want to leave a job, do you wait until you have X number of vacation days banked that you are allowed to cash out? Do you wait until you have paid off a certain thing? Do you wait until you have saved up X months of living expenses? Your intuition can clue you into where to act, when to act, and where to act too. And just ask yourself, when is the best time for me to make a move? Is it now? You can throw out time frames. I will say that timing can be a very difficult thing to get outside of now or not now. But with practice, you will have a better sense. Like you might hear a date, or you might glance at a stack of calendars and see a month. I have had all of that happen with me, but it can help you to find your timeline. Now, there's some situations I'm going to say when to move now, and quite often I think our intuition will tell us, but obviously if there's any sort of overt abuse that is very difficult, that is difficult to bear, like physical, emotional, sexual abuse, spiritual abuse, financial abuse, that is a time to get out as soon as possible. Also, here are things that are a little less readily apparent. If you have a strong feeling of evil or a strong feeling that something bad is going to happen, that is a great indicator to get out now. Also, if you suffer a decline in health, especially sudden decline in health, being in a situation, I've had it happen to me in relationships where you get sick or your hair starts falling out, and 3, 6 months before, sometimes even weeks before, you were just fine. That is a great indicator the situation is really to your detriment and you need to separate yourself. Now, the next thing to move into where you would want to really use your intuition is when to cut people or a situation off. Is it a no, you won't cut them off and you'll find other ways to manage them? Is it now, you cut them off now, or you cut them off forever? And that really requires you sitting with yourself, using the practice I've mentioned before, but getting calm, getting balanced, and asking yourself, do I cut them off? Yes or no? And now, forever, for how long? I have done this, I will say this, with my parents, and it is very hard. You need to be sure you are doing it for the right reasons and not because someone online said it would be a good idea or, other people did it. You need to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons and not just because you don't want to deal with the problem. Tune in and ask, is this the best solution? And if not, what are my alternatives? I find a lot with working with your intuition that it's important to form good questions or just ask, please tell me what it is that I don't know that I need to know. Help me with the answers or point me on the path to get the guidance I need. I will say, in terms of cutting off family or people in general that are close to you, there will almost always be regrets. You may never see them again. In one case, I mean, for me, I did not see one of my parents again. I'd never intended it for it to be like this, but they died before we had any sort of reconciliation. And to be honest, I had no hope of reconciliation. And I know it was the right thing to do, but I still feel like it was wrong on some level because I feel profoundly hurt by it. I don't think I could have changed the situation. In some ways, I would have made it worse, but um, it is what it is. I lost the ability to have contact with this parent. Now, that being said, time may change people in the situation, though it didn't in my case, but sometimes you're meant to be estranged for a certain amount of time for things to work out. Even if that person's heart never changes, other situations around that person or that thing might change. Like in the case of a job, the company might get sold, the company might shut down. The person who was difficult, he may have left a job, and the person who made your life hell may have gotten fired, moved on, whatever, and you come back a few years later and it's great. It was like a whole new experience there. Um, Time may work on it, and that is one thing you can inquire about. Also, if you do decide to cut someone off, especially if you have any sort of regret, check in with yourself intuitively, periodically, to see if the estrangement is still the best thing for you in the situation. Because sometimes you're just meant to lose contact for a while and let things play out, as I mentioned. And sometimes it is forever. But check in with yourself because even if it hurts, it may still be the right thing to do. Now, let's take a broad view of this. Another way to apply your intuition is to ask yourself, in the grand scheme of your life, where and how does this relationship fit into it? And just take note of what comes through for you. You know, is this relationship for a reason, a season, or a lifetime? I know that's been bandied about a lot all over the place, but know that even parental or familial relationships fit into this. Sometimes your parents are just meant to be the means by which you get onto this planet. And I know we have so much hope and expectation, and even you could say evolutionary reasons for close family bonds. But for some of us, they were there to get us on the planet. Is this relationship for a season of your life? And is that season over? Another good line of inquiry, line of intuitive inquiry to ask yourself, you know, is this for a reason, season, or lifetime? If you ask yourself that, what's the first answer you get? Um, how does it feel? Is this for a lifetime? Is this just a difficult relationship that is meant to be ongoing? I know it's crazy, but sometimes the answer is yes. I have heard accounts of people reconciling with their abusers, and that is something I could never do and I refuse to do because that does not fit into my life path. For some people, they are able to make their peace with people who have grievously hurt them. Um, and it's often later in life where the abuser needs help and they are able to step in and be a caretaker for that person. And I would say to that, God bless you, because I could not do that. But it's important to just know what is the nature of this relationship and know that, parental, familial, close friendships fit into this, or especially in workplace environments. I remember I'm old enough to have been part of the first .com era. And when I was let go, I was heartbroken because we were all made to feel that we were family. You know, hint, your employer is never your family. Even if they are your family member, there is a difference between family and business. Um, and you just thought like this job, especially if it's one of your first jobs, would go on forever. And it doesn't. It was just meant to be part of that season in your life. And it's time to move on to something better. So take a broad view, even when looking at it intuitively. And that's the beauty of intuition because it can pull you out of your hurt, your pain, your ego, whatever is affecting you, and help you to see the clearest path forward. And I'd just like to wrap up with this ending thought that the only guaranteed lifelong relationship is the one with yourself. The only guaranteed lifelong relationship is the one with yourself. I would add for me and for many of us a relationship with God, source, universe, whatever you call that great divine consciousness. But I know many people feel like they've been cut off from that, or it's not an important part of their life. But the only guaranteed lifelong relationship is the one with yourself. So I hope this has been helpful for you. But if you find that you're having difficulties in dealing with people you just can't quit, can't easily walk away from, and you'd like some one on one guidance about it, I invite you to have a text clarity session with me. You can ask up to 4 questions and get responses within 24 to 48 hours, plus a follow up session. And you can just ask the questions as you're ready and get the answers you need ASAP. It can be really helpful, especially with holidays coming up, deciding, do I go to this event? How do I manage this? We can do it over like WhatsApp or Telegram. or we can do it over regular messages. But if that sounds good to you, there will be a sign up link in the show notes below. So, in the meantime, I'm wishing you so much love. I'm wishing you a lot of forbearance and strength in dealing with the difficult people in your life, and know that your intuition is here to guide you to a better way of managing them. So, take care. Bye.